Hello, my name is Larry Tatum, and welcome to my video on basic blocks in Kenpo. Now in this tape, I'm going to start teaching you blocks, and I'm going to start teaching it from a horse stance, as we've learned earlier. This will occupy our feet so we don't have to worry where our legs are, where we do the blocks. Basically, there's 4 basic blocks in the Kenpo system that most of our motion stems from. And what we're going to work on first is called an inward block. An inward block is one of the more common blocks used. And from a horse position, hands cocked to your hips, inward block looks something like this. We can take a cocking position, bring it across the face of our body like so, or it can start from the hip and come across our body. Now I want you to imagine a square in front of you. And as you block, you're going to go from this corner of the square over to the other corner. And we're going to use the arm from the top of the fist down to the elbow. That's going to be your margin for error. You have all this to use to block with. Now as you block, we're going to call this the upper case and the lower case of the block, this area in here. And we'll see why as we go along. Now 2 ways I want you to practice this block. Firstly, I want you to start with the block cocked across from your ear. This will allow you to rotate, bring some torque into the block as it comes across the face of your body. When that block stops, it should be right across from the opposite shoulder and approximately eye level. You can use your own solar plexus as a guide to mark where the center of your body is and where that elbow should be aligned to the center of the body. Once you've executed and you've learned it properly from this angle, then I want you to learn it from the hip. Bring it across, and this is called a thrusting inward, whereas this is called a hammering inward. I'll show you why and how we use each one. All right, now let's see how these blocks are applied with my assistant, Rick. All right, first, Rick, if you'd put your guard up. If I have a choice to step into my opponent or step back, that's going to have a determining effect on how I'm going to use an inward block. Now generally, we know that the block covers from approximately the solar plexus up to eye level. It covers this area. If Rick throws a punch and I step back, I do have enough time to cock that arm and then hammer with the block. And a hammering inward creates a lot of power, obviously, because it drops down and you can use your marriage of gravity, and it has a tremendous amount of torque. It's a twisting of the arm as it hits. So as that punch comes, I can hammer it, and more than just a block, it becomes a strike as well. Okay, now, if I can't step back, say there's another person behind me, a wall, whatever, but my environment now is going to dictate where I go. If I have to step forward, then the block is going to have to stem and be executed right from my hip. Well, I don't have the torque from the hip, but I have a lot more speed. And this is one of the consequences of motion. Sometimes you may have to sacrifice some power for the speed of the move. This. Slow. All right, the next block I want to work on is called the outward block. Now there's 2 types of outward blocks basically used in the Kenpo system. We have a vertical outward and an extended outward. We're going to work on the vertical outward first. Now from a horse stance, it's no more than bringing your arm over to the opposite side of your body in line with your other fist and bringing the block across your face, again at eye level, and we're going to use the outside of the arm to block with. It's a vertical outward, literally because the block itself is straight up. All right, now, again, your solar plexus is going to be your guide to your center line. You don't want to be above the solar plexus, you don't want to be below it. If you're right at your solar plexus, you'll find that the top of the fist will be right at eye level as you come across with this block. It does have somewhat of a torque to it. As you come up, it has a little bit of torque as well. Now from the side, from a neutral position, I'm going to start it with the arm already down. I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to anchor it, or hinge it rather, from my elbow and bring it across at eye level. Again, we're using the outside of the arm to block with. All right, now with the help of Rick, I'm going to show you that this outward block, this vertical outward is generally used for in-close fighting. It's not the type of block to use on a hooking type of punch of this nature. But if Rick is close to me, and if a jab comes, it works and it hinges from that elbow. It's a very quick motion. I'll do it a little slower. As the punch comes, you just bring it across the face of your body this way. From this position, if you shot another punch, then you have your inward. Another punch again, then you have that vertical outward. Slow, slow again. Not fast.
1, 2, 3 times.
3 times, go. Okay, hold it there, guard up, now fast. All right, now that we've learned the inward block as well as the vertical outward block, I want you to learn how to combine them in a crisscross type of pattern. Now, if Rick shoots a right punch, we can start with an inward, and then we can cross the outward block in front of that. Okay, this is a double blocking type of motion. As he moves, and the other, we're just going to crisscross. Now, it's important to learn this. Now, we're using it from a horse stance. I wouldn't advise working from a horse stance in a real situation, but right now we're considering just the blocks. Again, when the punch comes, we have an inward, and then an outward, an inward, and then an outward. Okay, now, reason for this is, when you have this double blocking, if Rick shoots a right punch, and I use an inward here, and then I decide to crisscross with an outward, why would we take the time to do a double blocking? Or what value can it have for us? Well, if we analyze this, right at the inward, the backward motion or the reverse motion of the inward can be turned into a grab, and while the outward motion of the block strikes, it becomes now a break on that elbow as well. Not only does it become a break, but it sets itself up for a strike at that point as well. Now you watch it again, a little slower. I'm going to step off and do an inward. And here comes my outward with a break, which will arch him right up on his toes when you apply it. So you can see that by learning how to crisscross early, what's all the options that are open to you. And this is extremely important. Another thing is that once you're from this position, with your outward motion, the hand can rotate and again go to new targets from here, okay? Which we'll learn as we go along later on in the tapes. All right, the next block I want to work on is called the extended outward block. And it's exactly what the name implies. Rather than the block being vertical this way, what's going to happen is we're going to bring the block across the face of our body, and we're going to extend it out. It's no more than taking a vertical outward, turning the fist forward, and extending this out on approximately a 45-degree angle in relationship to your body from here. Now, this block is generally used, and you can see from the side, it comes straight up the center of your body, and when it reaches just about eye level, then it turns out away from you. So it becomes a shield. We call this a shielding block as well. It does just exactly that. It shields moves that are hooking in almost overhead somewhat. All right, now with the help of Rick, I'm going to have him throw a hooking left punch. All right, now as the punch comes, you're going to see why we use an extended over a vertical outward block. Shoot. It shields us, and it comes out to meet the punch. And you find that we both meet at a point in the air where both of our strength or our power is equal. We're matching each other at this point. You've got to remember that a block, the definition of it is that it meets force with force. Shoot it fast. And if I brace myself properly, which we're going to have to go over as well, the block will work for you. If he shoots the right punch, we can go to our inward, and then if we move in a little closer, then we can go into the vertical outward at this point. The next block I want to go over is called the upward block. Now this block is generally designed to work above eye level. The inward block worked eye level to the solar plexus. The outward block also worked within that area. That was the vertical outward. The extended outward still worked, but it was projected not so close to the body, but it was still eye level and in line with the center of the body. So it was still basically working in this area. All right, now what we're going to go over in this upward block is we've got to work a block now that works from the eyes above the head. Now, taking your fist, and I'm going to do this from a neutral stance, I'm going to bring my arm straight up the center of my body. And right up that center line, I'm going to stay on this side of the center line. And when I reach about eye level, I'm going to torque it so that it forms a 45-degree angle in front of my head and above it as well. Now, I want this block, if you look at it from the angle, side angle here, I want it to be a hand's length from the head. I don't want it over, because if you block something, the weight of it, the pressure of it's going to throw you off balance as well. But I want it about this far from your head, so whatever does hit is going to be deflected. Your own bicep is going to be like a shock absorber as well as your shoulder. Whatever hits the arm is going to hit at the angle that you've already created. We call this an angle of deflection. It's very important because we don't want the block to be straight across or horizontal to the ground, because whatever we catch, although we'll block it, we're going to have to work under that force. I don't want you to do that. I want that force to roll off of your arm. So we're going to create that angle of deflection at that point. Now, if you look at it from a horse position, straight up the center of the body, remember that center line, come to approximately eye level, and then torque it out so it forms like a roof. If you put both arms up there, it would be a roof, so to speak. Now, whenever you learn your blocks, make sure that you retrace the path that you went up to the block. Whether it be an inward, retrace the path, because that is reverse motion, and we're going to get more into that as well. The reverse motion of any block, any strike, also has a value to it. You remember in the other tapes I was explaining about how every move has a consequence, and also every move has more than one dimension to it. Likewise with your blocks, they all have more than just one dimension. Right now we're learning them just primarily for blocking, but I'm going to show you how this motion can be used as a weapon. And as I said before, each block has an upper and a lower case. To illustrate how this block is used, I'm going to have Rick give me an overhead strike. And I want you to watch how the angle of deflection truly works. Shoot. By creating the angle, in essence, what I'm doing is just as the block is just at the point where I'm in danger, I slip it. I slip the arm. I don't actually hit it with my fist, but I create the angle. So now as he keeps pushing, he slips off the angle I created. And if you look at it, I'm not trying to muscle this, force it back in any way. That's what I don't want to do. I don't want to absorb that much shock. What I want to do is just create the angle so that as he pushes, he cuts himself. Now from this position, if Rick starts to shoot the left punch, we're going to use the lower case of a what? Of an inward block. This is what I'm saying about knowing your upper and lower case blocks. From this point, what am I going to use? I'm going to slip in, what is this? It's a vertical outward block. What are my options? I can break, and I can keep going from this point and go into a strike. The next block I want to work is called a downward block. Now from a horse stance, hands cocked to your hip, you take your fist, bring it over to the opposite hand again, bring it down and let it just fall, let it hinge from the elbow, let it fall all the way down until the outside of the arm is in line with the outside of your thigh. I don't want you to block past it, but I want you to block to it. And retrace the step, hinging from the elbow, and come back up again. Now you'll find, as this is done, that from a side view into a neutral stance, as I bring it across the face of my body, that this again is a hand's length from my leg. And you'll notice that this line complements this line. That means that they're both, it's all equal distance all the way down. That's important because as we get later on into the tapes on katas, we're going to discuss this. So let's learn about it a little bit right now so you understand it. I don't want the block up this high. Obviously, they no longer complement each other. I don't want it this low. Again, it cancels itself out. This is approximately where I want it, about a hand span from there. And you'll be able to feel this as you practice it. Like the other blocks, I want you to learn to crisscross it. As the right block comes back, the new block goes over the top of it, and they crisscross at this point. Watch again. The old block gives way to the new, so it goes behind it. That's a good way to remember it. The old gives way to the new. And you might say that that block is reborn again as it comes out and becomes a new block again. For our purposes right now, I want you to learn this block for a defense against a kick. I'm going to show that first. I'm going to show it a couple of ways. First of all, if Rick shoots a kick and I drop back, I'm going to cock the hand over just for the purpose of learning and then execute the block. But now in a street situation, you can't take the time to cock that hand because you may get hit by the time you bring it back. So now here's where the crisscrossing comes in. Remember we were crisscrossing from a horse stance, right? All right, so what happens now is I'm going to let my right hand be the first deflection, or the first block. And as the kick comes, it's actually going to catch it first. And if you analyze this, it moved from what we call point of origin. Now remember that word because you're going to hear it a lot, especially in the other tapes when we get into self-defense. But point of origin refers to a basic move, strike or whatever, moving from where it is at the time. Rather than cocking my hand, which wastes time, I move it from where it is. This may look prettier to cock your hand first, but in reality, people, when you're out there in the street, it has to move from point of origin. So when he made that first kick, that was basically my first deflection, and that's basically all it is. Now, because of the crisscrossing, as the kick comes, you've got a deflection and then a major block. So you might say that this was a minor move to set you up for a major action. All right, now, carry it a step further, we can go with the kick. Jabs with a punch, inward block, outward, upward, and get rid of him. The next block I want to work is called a push-down block. It's not often seen, but it's used more than most people realize. Now, a push-down block is no more, starting from a horse, is taking your hand, bringing it up to about solar plexus height, bringing your hand up, and then suddenly doing exactly what it implies, pushing down. Now keep your elbow bent. I don't want you to lock it because if you block something here with a locked elbow, it's going to break your elbow or sprain it badly. So keep it bent so that this whole part of your arm acts as a shock absorber. Again, you bring it up, drop your weight. It's called marriage of gravity. You've heard it before. But that's the term we're going to employ, concept we're going to employ with this. Now with the help of Rick, I'll show you how we can use this block. Now using this push-down block, I'm going to show you how to use it against a knee strike. And later on, I'll show you the different uses for it. Like I said, we all found out now that there's many dimensions to each strike. Now, for instance, if Rick is facing me, he comes up with a right knee. It's basically just coming over and pushing that knee, bring it up again, please, and pushing it back down. And the angle that you're striking at has a greater amount of leverage than the knee does have coming up. You wouldn't imagine that, but it does. But you got to remember that all of your top weight of your body, synchronized with your marriage of gravity, is going to have a tremendous effect on that block. If we take it a step further, if my hands were tied up for any reason, and Rick came in with it, I can use it from this position as well to protect myself. Okay, now, if for some reason he comes in with the lead hand, shoot, the forward motion of that, the elbow actually acts as a block. As the knee comes up, then the secondary motion is the hand, bring the knee up, connecting with that knee. Now I'm going to use a little stance change in this, and when that comes in, I'm going to use, what's this called? We learned it earlier, is a closed neo stance. All right, now if he goes down to a horse, you can see that a little more easily by watching it from this angle. You can use it as a strike to the sternum from here. That in itself sets up another shot all the way down. Now remember when I told you to think of the reverse motion. What's the reverse of it? Is the elbow coming back up. So anytime you practice a basic, give value to the motion coming back. The next move I want you to learn when we speak of blocks is called a parry. Now it is a type of blocking, but if we analyze it a little further, we'll realize that, as I said before, blocking is meeting force with force. Parrying is redirecting force. Now parrying is a sophisticated form of blocking. It's used by those that would, rather than block somebody's large leg, their powerful arm, they would rather parry it and redirect it than get involved with that, would try and meet the guy force for force. So basically, if we take it from a horse position, an inward parry And that's the first one we're going to learn. It's an inward parry. I want you to think of a triangle out from your shoulders, out from where your solar plexus, in line with your solar plexus. And we know that an inward block moves out on this line. An inward parry, what it does is it moves out to the peak of the triangle. Whatever's coming in, it intercepts it at that peak, and then it carries it off to the other side, or redirects it off. It doesn't do this, all right, because when you start to push now, you're getting back into standardized blocking. But what it does is it follows that line going down the other side of the triangle and redirects the motion. When it's done quickly, it's done with a loose, relaxed hand. So as it comes up, that's all it does is it rotates and then off to the other side. If the other hand came up, it would look like this. If the other hand came up, it would come back like this. Now that's an inward parry. All right, now with the help of Rick, I'm going to show you how this parry can be used. Now, depending upon the situation, I may not want to block his punch. I may want to pull him away from me as quickly as I can. So as the punch comes, that's basically all I'm doing is redirecting that motion. And you see how it's setting Rick up. And it's pulling him and redirecting him away from me, rather than staying in and isolating both of us. Okay, I'm close enough to get hit, and I'm close enough to hit. But it's my choice. But basically what that parry did is it got me further away from him and got him going off at an angle. And I didn't have to suffer the abuse of a block. Now, depending upon your size, you can withstand hard blocking. Some people can't. Some people are very slight build. If I decide to go to the inside of Rick's arm, or the inside of the left, or to the outside, I can add a strike with it. And watch it from this angle. If I go to the inside of its punch, there's the first inward parry. Here's the second inward parry. And then here's the last one. I can go to the outside. And I can continually redirect Rick, get him, place him where I want him at the time. Let's do it a little faster. So we have the first, second, and continually moving him where I want him. All right, the second parry I want to work on is called an outward parry. Now, from a horse stance, hands cocked to your hips, you come out to the peak of the triangle, but instead of going down the opposite side, you come back down the same side. You come up underneath, intercept what's coming into that triangle, and bring it down the opposite side. And you notice that it's hinging from the elbow. Now I'm going to use the outside of my hand or arm. Here's my margin of error. Here's the uppercase. Here's the lowercase, or the middle. But I'm going to use all of it, if I have to redirect that motion. Now with the help of Rick, I'll show you how we apply this. All right, now, we're going to use an outward parry, but I'm going to use an inward parry first, so you can see how the outward is really applied in this. First, as Rick comes in with a step-through punch, I use a what? An inward parry. Then he steps through, and I use an outward parry. And all I'm doing is redirecting that motion. Now, for me, to get that parry to work properly, you notice I had to go to a stance change, and we learned it earlier, a cat stance, and it works well at this point. Remember that. All right, let's go back. We'll do it a little faster. We have the inward, and then the outward, right in here. And what is the reverse motion of this? It looks like an inward block. You extend your fingers, and you got an automatic strike in there. The cat stances also set you up for what? A strike as well. Okay, now, if we take an outward parry by itself, we can go to the outside, but this hand isn't being used at this point, okay? So we're going to use an inward and an outward and use them together. Basically, the inward does the first part of the redirection. The outward picks it up and continues it on. So if he has a lot of forward momentum on it, we're going to redirect him away, and he'll come up on this foot, as you saw. Again, the options are there, ready for to use at that point. Everything's set up, whether it be an eye hook, back knuckle, kick, but those double parries set us up for the action. If you look at it from this angle over here, for a left punch, there's the double parry again. Inward, here's the outward. And of course your imagination can run away with you at this point. Next parry I want to work is a downward, outward parry. And from a horse stance, it looks similar to a downward block. But the difference is this now. We're going to think of that triangle. We're going to come out to the peak of the triangle, open the hand, and come back down the same side. So this is another outward parry at this point. It's downward because obviously we're going down. And we're going to deflect kicks, but that doesn't mean that it's just designed to deflect kicks, because your opponent could be down on his knees at that point. You could be deflecting his punches, his head, or anything for that matter. So you bring it out to the peak of the triangle, just so your elbow shouldn't go out any further than your own ribs. And once you reach the peak of that triangle, just guide it down and away from you to the outside of the leg. Don't go too far back, because you've got recovery time. You may have to come back. So keep it in with the width of your own body at this point. All right, now with the help of Rick, I'll show you how to use this downward parry. Now, we're going to take a kick. And if Rick takes the kick here, and I parry, it's going to work. If I'm late on my parry, I'm going to get hit. It's all there is to it. But the point of it is, back in the other tape when we worked on stance changes and foot maneuvers, I want this parry to be backed up by a little safety measure. So as the kick comes, I'm going to drop back to, what is it called? What is it? That's the twist stance. All right, or rear crossover, you might call it. But as he moves in, I'll bring the other hand up in a checking position. Now remember that word, because that's going to be in one of our other tapes as well. From that position, if he shoots a back knuckle, I've got an inward, outward, and then of course I can go from where I want at that point. Now watch this again. First we have the downward parry, and then the inward parry. And those are two of them, an inward and an outward that was used. All right, the next parry is called an inward downward parry. Now from a horse stance, what you do, again we're going to use that triangle, but we're just going to come out and then over to the other side. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to come out and over to the other side. Now it can be done one of two ways. You can come out, keep the palm of the hand facing away from you, or you can come out and put the palm of the hand in. Depending upon the situation, it can be used either way. So learn it both ways. I'm going to use this one now. Now what's nice about these downward parries is they all move from point of origin. And they move very quickly. For instance, if I'm being tackled from Rick here, no more than a redirection. And if you look at it without Rick being there, it was stepping back and just turning my body, and the arm naturally goes into position. Again, watch the complementary angle. Now, what's open to me when he does this? You tell me. There's a lot open here. Whatever we want to add, present, change, whatever, it's all there for us. Okay, now, if we use it against a kick, you'll find that in some of the seminars that I'd give, I would draw an analogy between somebody running from a fight and being the victor physically from running from it. And you might say, as the guy was kicked at, he turned to run from it, not realizing that his turn created a defense. But then in his fright, as he started to beat feet, he caught the guy in the groin. Little did he know, as he kept on running, he had defeated the guy back there. All right, now again, watch what this does. All we do is we turn. The stance I'm in is a closed kneel. I have a checkup. My options are open to me. I can scoop the groin, kick the leg, sweep, and so forth. We'll get into this even deeper as we get on to the other tapes. But this is how these parries work. Start learning them. The next parry I want you to learn is called the horizontal parry. Now we have an inward and an outward. I'll show you the inward horizontal parry first, and it's using the palm of the hand. Now from a horse position, I want you to take your hand, drop it down to your side. I want you to bring it across, hinging from the elbow, starting with your shoulder, hinging from your elbow, and then using the palm of the hand. I don't want your palm of the hand straight out. I want a slight bend to it, because we're going to use this part of the hand to actually connect with when we do a parry. Now, if you look at it, it's not so much working the triangle, but now we're working more of a half circle here. All right. Now, it can be used on a triangle and down the other side. It's similar to an inward parry, but I want you to think of more of it working out away from your body. All right, now with the help of Rick, I'll show you how this is applied. If I take a punch, and a punch is coming to the chest, that's a perfect place to use this. It's very quick, it's very strong. Remember to synchronize your parries, no matter what type you're being used, or your blocks, but synchronize them that they make contact as your back foot connects as well. Looking at it from another angle, as Rick punches, pop, there's your parry. Again, it opens Rick up, sets up new targets, all the way from the heels of his feet. Everything's set up and ready to be applied. And so, all right, now I want to go into the horizontal outward parry. Again, using the palm of the hand. But now I want you to come out to the center of your body and turn it away from you. And again, it's horizontal. It's parallel to the ground. Instead of coming in now, we're going to go out away from the center of our body. And remember that anything that moves away from the center of the body is considered an outward motion. Anything that comes towards the center is considered an inward motion. But as I come out, I rotate it. And you notice it's coming out like an inward parry. But then just as it reaches the peak of that triangle in front of us, then we push it out to the side. If I take a punch, and if my hands are already in position, say if my guard is already up and he shoots a punch, from this angle, it automatically turns out and works. Okay, let's look at it from another angle from here. From the left side with a left punch, then the parry works this way as well. All right, the last parry I want to work is called an upward parry. Now, it's similar to an upward block in that it goes right up the center line when you reach eye level, but instead of going away from you to create that angle of deflection, we're going to actually pick up his arm or whatever's coming overhead and parry it and carry it back away from us. Look at it again. We're going to come up closed fist, and then the hand's going to open, and we're going to actually pick it up and guide it away from us. Now, if you look at it from the side, as I come up, you'll notice that the hand comes over the top of the head. And this is one of very few times that we're going to use a move like this. But I want you to learn that. That's an upward parry. And they crisscross. Like the upward blocks crisscross, these crisscross as well. All right, now I'm going to have Rick give me an overhead strike. Instead of using an upward block to have Rick go off to the side of me, and that's what basically would happen. If he did the punch and I slipped an upward, I'm going to lose him here, and of course I would be allowed to use another technique. But for my purposes now, what I want Rick to do as the punch comes is I want to pick him up but carry him back over my head, because I may not want to send him in that direction. So as that punch comes, I'm going from a neutral to a forward. I pick it up, and then I use another upward parry. It comes up over the arm, but going in the opposite direction. And I'm making this little roof over my head. And then at that point, if I want to drop in and grab the groin, I just follow off that momentum, that circle that I'm making. All right, let's play with these parries a little bit, put them together, and see what we can come up with. We're not going to strike Rick. We're just going to redirect him away from us, continuously redirecting as he keeps coming at us with different strikes. Double parry, outward parry, inside downward, double parry again, outward downward parry, and a redirection. All right, now let's look at this a little more quickly. All right, now we're going to do this a little bit quicker. Go. At this point in the tape, I want to put your blocks that you learned and put them with foot maneuvers. Now, I'm not going to reteach you the foot maneuvers. They're in the previous tape. But I want to start putting the blocks, the parries with his foot maneuvers. And I'm also going to give you some blocking exercise from a stationary position, particularly a horse stance, to learn to coordinate the crisscrossing of your blocks. But what I want to start with is we remember the step through. But I want you to start practicing your foot maneuvers and utilizing your blocks and your parries. So we're going to start from a left neutral bow. And from this position, you can bring one hand back, cock it as a preparatory position. We can step through with an inward block, left inward. We can reverse it. Then we can step through with an upward block, crisscross them, other block, of course reverse it. We can step through with a vertical outward block and reverse your step throughs. Make sure that they're smooth. Step through with an extended outward block. And if you want, you can cock your hand all the way back, or you can leave one hand up as a check. We'll get into that later. What I'm interested in right now is that you can coordinate your steps with the block itself. And back. Good. And your downward blocks. And reverse. Push down. Forward and reversed as well. And back. All right, now, let's go out of the step-throughs and go into something a little more sophisticated. Zigzagging. We use that as a form of foot maneuvers, and that's no more than crossing over from side to side, in a sense. So what we can do, we can start from a left neutral bow, zigzag to our left with a downward, another downward from this position, and you can practice it this way. All right, you can start from your neutral. You can cross over and zigzag with an upward, because you may be off and redirecting your opponent as you do this. Okay, we did a downward to upward. We can zigzag with an extended outward, a vertical outward, and back. We can zigzag with a push-down block in this position. All right, so we have different foot maneuvers such as step-throughs with our blocks, zigzagging with our blocks. You should be able to execute your switching in place. And as you switch properly, you should be able to switch with your blocks smoothly and comfortably. Doesn't matter which block you're using, as long as it's smooth. And you notice that my blocks and my stance are complete at the same moment. My foot doesn't get there first and plant with my weight, and then the block, or the block gets there first, and that happens, but they're synchronized together. This is extremely important, no matter what block you're using. We also have shuffling, and as we learned in the other tape, shuffling gets us to and from our targets, but you should be able to shuffle smoothly with your blocks. If I shuffle forward, I should be able to shuffle in such a way that my block and my stance stop at the same point. All right? If I shuffle back, doesn't matter which block I'm using, but again, synchronize them so they're smooth with each other. You can step through with a block and shuffle with another block. You can step drag with your blocks and reverse as well. Play with the shuffling, play with the blocks, the step-throughs, the crossovers, and so forth. Get accustomed to it. Because you're going to need this later on, because when we get into the freestyling tape, we're going to be using every one of these foot maneuvers. And your basics now have to be synchronized with that. Another suggestion is to take a horse stance. Take your blocks and do a routine that we call in Kenpo a star block. It's no more than starting with an upward block. We'll use the right hand. And using the same hand, coming down to an inward, moving over to an extended outward. Take the same hand, drop it down, hinging from the elbow to a downward block. Cock your hand back, and then come back with a push-down block. Learn it on the left side. That left side should be just as familiar to you as your right later on. Put them together and see what you come up with. Okay? If you want to get real fancy, start one up, one down, and have them both reverse. This is even a little harder. This takes a little more practice, but with time, you can do it. And back. Now, another point I want you to remember, don't forget, is that learn now to synchronize your covers. Remember how we covered in the other tape with your blocks. And a cover is no more than changing the direction from front to rear or from side to side. We're going to use from front to rear right now. So if I start with my back towards you, with my guard up, and I have to cover, I should be able to do it smoothly with my blocks. And if I have to cover again, it has to be another smooth action. And if I want to move this way across the floor, I come across, and again, come up. Do it with your parries as well. But get used to covering with your blocks as you practice. Good. Well, I hope you enjoyed this segment of the series of tapes on basic blocks. But remember that, it's just basic blocks. As we go further into the series, we'll get into advanced blocking, advanced parries, and so forth, and advanced footwork. Practice. That's all I can say. Give yourself even 20 minutes a day. Depending upon your lifestyle, 20 minutes will help considerably. And if you're not working out physically, work out mentally. If you're at lunch, dinner, someplace where you can just kind of let your mind relax a little bit, think about what you're learning. Think about it. Practice it. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got more tapes to come, and I wish you the best of luck in your training.